Welcome back to the Creepy Walker. Settle in, get comfortable, and let these stories carry you somewhere quiet. Every story here is made for one purpose, to help you drift off and fall asleep. No jump scares, just slow, dark, and cozy storytelling right before bed. If you enjoy what I do here, please like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And drop a comment letting me know where you're from. I love seeing where you all are from. I don't run any ads on this channel. Not a single one. These videos are completely free for you, and I want to keep it that way. If you'd ever like to support me financially, I have a Patreon. The link is pinned in the comments and in the description below. Even the smallest support means everything and keeps this channel alive. Now, get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like. Let's walk. My cousin Danny called me about a job, and I said yes, because I had $40 and a truck that needed registration. That is the whole reason I was out there. Danny is my cousin on my mother's side. We grew up close, and he had done some things I knew about, and some things I did not. This was one I should not have agreed to. The job was driving escort for a flatbed. I did not ask what was on it until the night we left, and by then I had already told him yes. What was on it was a skid steer loader. The serial number plate had been painted over with something gray. I noticed it when we stopped in Buttonwillow to get gas, and I asked Danny about it, and he said don't worry about the serial number. So I did not ask again. I want you to understand that I knew something was wrong before we left, and I got in my truck anyway. That part one have never tried to argue around. I knew. The plan was simple enough that I did not think anything could go wrong with it. Danny drives the flatbed. I follow him in my truck. We stay together all the way down to Taft, where some guy Danny knew had a yard and was expecting the equipment. Maybe 3 hours total. Danny said we were going late because the route was easier with less traffic, and I believed that. And that was also probably not the whole reason, but it was a reason. We left around 11 at night. It was 2003, middle of summer, and I had a cup of ice from the gas station that I was chewing on while I drove. I stayed about 2 car lengths behind Danny. The road we took cuts south off 99 and goes out into the oil fields, and once you are past a certain point there is not much out there. Some pump jacks. Access roads going off into the dark. The occasional truck coming the other way. About 20 miles before Taft, something came in behind me. It was a pickup, dark colored. I thought black or dark green, hard to tell at night. It came from one of the access roads and pulled in behind me without stopping. I watched it in the mirror for a minute. It settled in at the same distance I was keeping behind Danny. I thought it was probably an oil worker heading home or heading to a site. They were all over those roads at all hours, so I did not do anything except keep driving. Then about a minute later another pickup came from an access road ahead. It pulled in between me and Danny, so now there was Danny's flatbed, then this truck, then me, then the other truck behind. And again I watched for a minute. Again they matched speed. Danny's speed, which meant my speed, which meant we were all just going the same speed down the same road. That can happen. That is a thing that happens on an empty road at night. But they kept matching it. When Danny sped up a little, both trucks sped up. When he slowed, they slowed. And I started looking more carefully at the truck in front of me. I could see it was a full-size pickup, older. No identifying marks I could make out. 2 people inside. I could see that much. I flashed my headlights at Danny. That was our signal if anything came up. I did it twice. His brake lights did not come on. He did not slow down. He did not flash back. I do not know if he saw it or if he was watching something else or what. I tried it again a minute later, and still nothing. The truck behind me had been getting closer in small increments. Not fast, just a little at a time, until it was close enough that when the road curved I could not see its headlights anymore, just the lit-up faces of the 2 men in the cab when something caught the light. The driver was smoking. He had his window down a little, and I could see the cigarette move. The passenger was sitting straight and looking ahead. Looking at me, I mean. My truck. I tried to think of reasons this was normal. 2 trucks both going to the same job site. 2 guys running the same errand. Oil field schedules are strange. People work all hours. There is always equipment moving around out there. I tried to make it make sense, and I could not make it make sense because of the speed. Nobody matches your speed like that without knowing your speed. You would have to be watching the car in front of you very carefully to stay that exact distance behind for that long. Then the truck in front of me slowed down. Not hard, not a brake check, just eased off until I could see the gap growing between it and Danny. And Danny kept going. He did not notice, or he did not look back. The flatbed just kept moving, and pretty soon there was a real distance between it and the truck in front of me. I touched my brakes. I was trying to hold my position, keep some space in front of me, not close up on the truck that had slowed. The truck behind me surged. Not enough to be a real crash, but enough that my hands came off the steering wheel for a second and I had to grab it again. It was a shove, deliberate and controlled. My whole truck moved forward with it. I could hear the impact, feel it in the seat. I let off the brakes. The truck behind me backed off to where it had been. The truck in front of me was still going slow. I was caught between them now. Danny's flatbed was ahead and getting farther. I could see his taillights. The passenger in the truck in front of me put his arm out the window. He pointed. He did not look back at me. He just put his arm out and pointed to the right. There was a dirt road going off into the oil field there, one of those access roads, and he was pointing at it. His arm was out there for a long time. Not waving, not gesturing, just pointing at that road. Very calm. I want to tell you I did something smart at that point. I do not remember doing anything smart. I do remember that I pushed the gas. Hard. I came up on the back of the truck in front of me very fast, and I thought I was going to hit it, and then it accelerated too. They were not going to let me rear-end it. So we were all going fast now, all three of us, and the truck behind me was right there, and I was looking at Danny's taillights ahead and trying to get to them. I do not know what I thought was going to happen if I got to Danny. He was driving a flatbed with a skid steer on it. He was not going to be able to do anything. I just wanted to be near something I recognized. The truck in front slowed again. Sharp this time. I had to brake hard to not hit it, and as soon as I did, the truck behind me tapped my bumper again. Not as hard as before. Like a reminder. We were at the dirt road now. The truck in front pulled slightly to the left, not turning, just angling enough to indicate. The passenger still had his arm out, pointing right. Danny's taillights were small by this point. I turned right. I do not know why I turned right. I have thought about this a lot. I think I turned because the other option was getting hit again, and I did not know how hard they were willing to hit me. I think I turned because when someone is calm about it, when they are not yelling or rushing, something in your brain treats it as a reasonable transaction. Like something official is happening, and you should cooperate. I do not know if that is true. I just know I turned. The two pickups did not follow me down the dirt road. I know that because when I went about 30 yards and stopped and looked back, they were both gone. Just gone. Continuing south on the road toward Taft, or turned around, or pulled onto another access road. I could not see them. There was nothing. I sat in the dark for a while. The dirt road went straight into the field, and there was a pump jack working somewhere nearby. I could hear it. I called Danny's cell phone. It rang and went to voicemail. I called it again. Voicemail. I sat there for I do not know how long. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been more. Eventually I drove back out to the main road and went south. I found Danny's flatbed pulled over about 2 miles from the yard in Taft. He was outside the truck, leaning against the door, and he saw me pull up and said something. I do not remember what. I told him what happened. He listened, and then he said it was probably just guys messing around. That happened out here, and he did not look at me when he said it. We unloaded the equipment in the yard. The guy who ran the yard came out and signed something and gave Danny an envelope, and did not speak to me at all. We drove back separately. Danny called me 2 days later and said I should not tell anyone about the job. I said okay. He said no, really, nobody. I said I understood. I did not see Danny much after that. He moved to Fresno the following year, and I heard from my mother that he got into some trouble, different trouble, and then I stopped hearing about him. The part one still do not understand is why they let me go. That is the part one have gone around and around. If they wanted to run me off the road, if they wanted to take the equipment, if they were cops doing something I did not understand, if they were someone Danny had crossed, if they were something else entirely, none of those explanations fit what they actually did. Running me off onto a dirt road and then driving away. I have never come up with a reason for that. What the point of it was. Maybe they saw something on the road ahead. Maybe someone came on the radio. Maybe I was not who they thought I was. Maybe Danny pulled over and called someone, and someone called someone. I do not know what Danny might have done. I never went back out on those roads at night, and I never drove escort for anything again, and I stopped asking Danny for work a long time before he moved to Fresno. The $40 I had when he called me, I still would have had it when this was all over because Danny paid me cash for the job, and I had not spent the 40 yet. I spent a lot of time in the next few years thinking that something was going to come from it. A knock on the door. A phone call from someone I did not know. Something that would explain what those men wanted, and why they stopped wanting it. Nothing came. That is everything I know about it. Her father was dying, and we drove up to see him in February. That is the situation. That is why we were on that road at that hour. He had been in hospice in Presque Isle since November, and this was our second time making the drive from Portland. My wife's name is Carol. Her father's name was Bernard. He died 3 weeks after this. So I want to say that first because it matters for understanding why Carol was the way she was in the car. She was not sleeping because she was tired. She was sleeping because she had spent 2 days sitting next to him, and she did not know what else to do with herself. We left Presque Isle around 10 at night. I was going to wait until morning, but Carol wanted to go. So we went. She pulled her coat off and balled it against the window, and was asleep before we hit the highway. That is just something she can do. I have never been able to do that. The drive from Presque Isle to Portland is about 4.5 hours if the roads are clear. In February they are not always clear, but that night they were. They had been salted, and the temperature was low enough that nothing was freezing back up. So I was making decent time. Not fast, but decent. The road through that part of Maine, once you get off 95, is 2 lanes. A lot of it runs next to frozen lakes or through cut timberland. And in February, with the snowbanks built up the way they were, you cannot see much past the headlights. You are just in this corridor. Trees or banks on both sides and black road ahead. I was on Route 11, I think, or close to it. I do not remember exactly. I had been on the same stretch of roads the first trip, and I was mostly just following what I remembered plus the phone GPS. The GPS kept losing signal, which it had done the first time too, so I was not worried about that. Carol talked in her sleep around 2 in the morning. Little half sentences, the way she does. I could not hear most of it, but I caught something about peaches. Forgetting peaches somewhere. I remember it because it was the kind of thing you remember. A person you love saying something small and private in their sleep while you are driving through the dark, and it made me feel okay for a second. Right after that, my headlights picked up a person in the road. They were walking dead center in my lane, coming toward me head down. I hit the brakes. ABS kicked in. The car stopped maybe 30 feet from them. They did not stop. They did not look up. They stepped off to the right and went into the trees. I sat there. Engine was running. Carol had not woken up. I said something out loud. I do not remember what exactly, just to hear my own voice. She made a sound, not really a word, and put her head back against the coat. The person had been wearing a heavy coat, dark colored. Long arms. The way the arms were swinging was off, but I could not tell you specifically how. They were not walking fast. I do not know what they were doing out there. No flashlight. No reflective gear. The nearest town, by my guess, was at least 15 miles in either direction. This is a thing that happens in Maine, people walking on the road at night. I know that, hunters and people with car trouble, but it is not common and not at that temperature. I waited maybe a minute, watching the tree line where they had gone. I could not see anything in there. No light, no movement. The snow on the bank where they had stepped was steep and packed hard. I did not see how they had gone in without struggling, but I had not watched that closely. I started moving again. I went slow for a while after that, maybe 20 miles an hour. I had the defrost running low, and the windshield was starting to haze at the edges. I wiped it with my sleeve and kept going. About half a mile, maybe a little less, the headlights caught someone in the road again. Same coat, same walk, head down same way, arms moving the same way they had moved before. I stopped the car. I want to explain the road situation so you understand why this was the thing I could not get past. On either side of the road, at that point, there was no tree line. We were crossing a lake. I do not know which lake. There were reflector posts along the shoulder, and beyond them the snow was flat and open in both directions as far as the headlights reached. The figure was ahead of me in the lane, walking toward me the same as before. There was nowhere they could have come from on that road in the time it had taken me to drive half a mile. I sat there with the car stopped and watched them. They walked the same way. The coat was the same. I could not see the face because the head was down. This time they did not step off the road. They kept walking toward me, and then I lost them. I do not know how else to say it. 1 second they were there, and then I was looking at empty road. I did not get out of the car. I want to be clear about that. I thought about it for maybe 2 seconds and decided no. Carol was still asleep. I drove. I went maybe 40, which was faster than I should have been going, but I wanted to be past that lake and back into the trees. The GPS came back for a few minutes and showed me on Route 11, which confirmed where I thought I was. Then it dropped out again. For the next 20 minutes, I did not see anything. Road, banks, trees, road. A couple of miles of open field at one point where a farm had been cleared, some kind of equipment shed with the roof caved from snow. Nothing on the road. I had the radio off. I had turned it off before Presque Isle because Carol was sleeping, and I had not turned it back on. I thought about turning it on, but I did not want to wake her. Then the headlights caught the figure again. This is the part one keep going over, and I do not know what to tell you about it. This was maybe 25 miles past the lake. It had been 20 minutes of driving. The figure was in the road ahead of me, same position, same coat, walking toward me with the head down and the arms going that same way. I stopped. The road here had trees on both sides, and the banks were high, for feet or more. There was a ditch behind the bank on the right side that I remembered from the first trip because I had been nervous about it. So the figure had no obvious way off the road except back the way they came. I was stopped maybe 40 feet from them. I had the high beams on. They walked. Same pace as before. Not fast. Not slow. Covering ground. I watched them. I had my foot on the brake and I was watching them, and they came forward and I was looking for the face, and the face was down, and then they were at maybe 20 feet, and I could see the coat clearly and the length of the arms, and they were still walking, and then I put the car in reverse and backed up. I backed up 100 feet, maybe more. Then I stopped. The road ahead was empty. I sat there for a while. I do not know how long. Carol was still asleep. At one point she shifted and pulled the coat tighter and said something I could not hear. Eventually I drove forward past where the figure had been. I went slow. I looked at both sides of the road as I passed, and I did not see anything in the trees. I did not see footprints in the bank, but the bank was the packed gray kind, sand and spray frozen into it, and I do not know if you would see prints in that or not. I kept going. I drove the rest of the way to Portland without stopping, except once for gas in Bangor. I did not stop in Bangor for long. I paid at the pump and got back in the car. Carol woke up somewhere around Waterville. She asked where we were, and I told her, and she said okay, and went back to sleep for another hour. I never told her about this. Bernard died 3 weeks later, and we went back up for that, and I drove the same roads, and I did not see anything. I have thought about whether to look up if anything was reported that night, a missing person or something, and I have not done it. I do not know what I think it would tell me. The thing I come back to is the half a mile. The first time I saw them, and the second time. That specific distance, and that specific road. I have driven a lot of miles in my life, and I know roughly how long half a mile takes, and I know what was on either side of that road, which was a frozen lake with nothing on it for as far as I could see. I have also thought about whether I was more tired than I knew, and whether you can see something like that when you are tired. I was tired. I had been in that hospice room for 2 days, same as Carol. The lights in those places are a particular kind of bad, and the sound is a particular kind of bad, and I had not slept much. So I have thought about that. But I stopped the car all 3 times. The ABS chattered the first time. Those are things that happened in the real car on the real road. Carol's father was a quiet man. I did not know him well. I had met him 4 times before the hospice visits. He was not the kind of person who talked much, and Carol had told me before we met him that I should not try to fill the silence, that he was not uncomfortable in it. So I did not try. We would sit in his room, and Carol would talk to him, and I would sit in the chair by the window and look at the parking lot. I am telling you this because I have thought about whether that was part of it, being in that room, then being alone in the dark on that road. I do not know what that would explain, or if it explains anything. The last time, when I backed up, the road was empty when I drove forward. I went past the spot slowly, and I looked, and the road was empty, and I kept going south. My mother was moved into assisted living in March, and I didn't get down there until June. That's the first thing you need to know because it matters for why I was in the state I was in when I was driving. 3 months of her calling me, calling my brother, calling the facility staff, calling me again. and I had been putting off going down there to clean out the apartment because once I did that it was real, it was final, and also I just didn't want to do it. But my brother lives in Portland and wasn't going to do it, and we were paying month to month on an apartment she wasn't living in anymore, so I went. I left on a Thursday. I was going to leave Wednesday, but I didn't. The drive was about 6 hours in normal conditions, and I had taken the same route maybe 4 times before, so I wasn't worried about it. I had the GPS because my phone mount had broken sometime in the winter, and I didn't want to look down at my phone while I was driving. The GPS was one of those old Garmin things, the kind you stick to the windshield with a suction cup. I had bought it probably 8 years ago. The battery in it had swollen, so it didn't hold a charge at all anymore. And even when it was plugged in, it would restart every so often for no reason, just go dark and reboot, which was annoying, but I had learned to live with it. I left later than I meant to, which I want to say up front, because it explains why it was dark when things started. I meant to leave at noon, and I left at 4. I had slept badly for a few nights leading up to it. I don't know why exactly, just the usual stuff you tell yourself is nothing. I stopped once for gas, and once to get food I didn't finish, and by the time I was in the southern part of the state, it was past 8 and fully dark. I had missed 2 exits already. Not by a lot, I caught myself both times, but I was drifting. There's a stretch of the highway where it widens out, and there's construction on both sides, and everything looks the same, and I had gone into one of those states where you're driving, but you're not really tracking anything. I don't know how else to describe it. You've probably done it. You come back to yourself, and you're 5 miles past where you remember being, and you don't remember any of it. I came back to myself, and I was on a road I didn't recognize. Not a highway. A 2-lane road, no center line, flat on both sides. Corn or soybeans, I don't know which, it was dark. I had clearly taken an exit, but I didn't know when or why. The GPS had rerouted a couple of times already that night, and I had been following it without really looking. So I don't know if I followed it wrong, or if it sent me somewhere, and then rebooted before it could correct me. That happened sometimes. It would reboot mid-instruction, and when it came back it would think I was somewhere I wasn't. I kept going, because stopping on a 2-lane road at night didn't seem like a better idea. There were windmills out to the east. I could see the red lights on them blinking. A lot of them spread out. I don't know how far. It's hard to judge distance at night with just blinking lights. The GPS had been off for a while. Not rebooting, just off. Black screen. I had tried pressing the button on the side and nothing happened, which had happened before, and I figured the connection on the cigarette lighter plug was loose. I was planning to pull over and reseat it, but I wanted to find a wider spot first. Then I heard the static pop from the speaker. The little click it makes right before it says something. The voice said, "Continue straight." I looked over at it automatically. The screen was black. Completely black. There was nothing on it. I reached over and I unplugged it. I pulled the cord out of the cigarette lighter and I put it on the passenger seat. I kept driving. I told myself it was some kind of power discharge, like a capacitor or something holding a little charge. I don't know enough about electronics to know if that's a real thing. It seemed like a real thing, and I held on to that. A few miles up the road, there was a farmhouse set back from the road, maybe 100 feet. It had a long gravel driveway. Every light in the house was on. Every window was lit up yellow, and there were people standing in the windows. I want to be precise about this. I'm not saying I thought I saw people. I saw people. Silhouettes, because the light was behind them, but the shape of people. One in each window that I could see, which was 3 windows on the ground floor, and I think 2 upstairs, though I was past the upstairs ones fast enough that I'm less sure about those. They weren't moving. None of them. I could see them for maybe 4 or 5 seconds as I drove past, and none of them moved. I slowed down, but I didn't stop. I don't know why I didn't stop. I kept going, and I watched the house in the rearview mirror until it went around a curve. The GPS crackled. The cord was still unplugged. It was on the passenger seat where I had put it, and I could hear the cord dragging on the floor mat when I went over a rough patch. And the unit crackled, and the voice said, "Vehicle behind you has turned off its headlights." I checked the mirror. There was nothing back there. The road was empty. I watched the mirror, and I kept driving, and about a minute later there were headlights. Far back, maybe half a mile or more, coming up over a little rise in the road. Low and slow. They had been off, or they had been below the rise. I can't tell you which. I don't know. I want to be clear about the GPS thing, because I know how it sounds. The cord was unplugged. I looked at it when I heard the voice, and the cord was on the floor, and the unit was on the seat. I picked it up, and the screen was black. I pressed the button, and nothing happened. I put it back down. I sped up. Not a lot, just enough. The headlights behind me stayed the same distance back, or I thought they did. It's hard to judge that kind of thing. I found a gas station about 4 miles up the road, a Casey's, and I pulled in. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes. I went inside and got a coffee I didn't want and stood by the counter for a while. The guy working was watching something on his phone with headphones in. I almost said something to him, but I didn't know what I would say. I bought the coffee, and I went back to the car. There were no other cars in the parking lot when I went in. When I came out, there was a truck parked on the far side of the lot, facing the road, engine off, no one visible inside. I don't know when it pulled in. I hadn't heard anything. I got back on the road, and I plugged the GPS back in. It rebooted like normal, took about 30 seconds, and when it came up it showed me where I was and gave me a route to my mother's apartment. It worked fine the rest of the drive. It never did anything like that again. I got to the apartment around midnight. I slept on her couch because I hadn't thought to bring sheets for the bed, and all her linens were already boxed up. I slept fine, actually. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next day I finished the clean-out, and I drove home. I took the highway the whole way, no detours, and I was home by 7. I've thought about it a lot since then. The GPS thing I've mostly talked myself down from. Electronics do weird things. Capacitors do hold charge. I looked it up, though I'm not sure it would be enough to run the speaker. I don't know. The people in the windows, I don't have an explanation for. It could have been something else, something that looked like people from the road at night. I was tired. I hadn't slept right in days. The thing I keep coming back to isn't any one of those things. It's the truck in the parking lot. I stood inside that Casey's for 5, maybe 8 minutes, and I didn't hear a vehicle pull in. The engine was cold, the hood was cold. I touched it when I walked past. It had been there a while, and I had been the only car in that lot when I pulled in. I had noticed because I remember thinking the lot was empty and the lights were on, and it looked strange. An empty lit parking lot at that hour in the middle of that flat country. I don't know when it got there. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was there when I turned in and I just didn't see it, which seems unlikely because the lot wasn't big and my headlights would have swept across it, or if someone parked it quietly while I was inside, or if it had pulled in from the back of the property where there might have been another entrance I didn't notice. I didn't look inside it. I thought about it and I didn't do it. I got in my car and I left. That's the whole thing. I know it doesn't go anywhere. That's why I've never said anything about it. There's no way to tell it that ends up anywhere. It just stops, because that's where it stopped for me. I drove home. Nothing else happened. I still have the GPS. It's in the junk drawer in the kitchen. I keep meaning to throw it out. So this was late 2018, and I was driving overnight from Tulsa up to western Kansas to pick up my brother. My younger brother, Tyler. He'd gotten kicked out of a trade school program out there and needed a ride back, and I was the only one who could go. My own car had a transmission problem, so I borrowed my boss's truck, a Ford Ranger older one. My boss said take it, just bring it back with a full tank. I left Tulsa around 9, maybe 9:30. The plan was to drive straight through, pick Tyler up in the morning, come back the same day. It's not a short drive. You go up through Oklahoma and then cut west into Kansas on Highway 54, which is just a two-lane road through a lot of nothing. I'd done parts of it before, but not the whole stretch at night. Around midnight the rain started. Not heavy at first, just enough that I had to turn the wipers on. I was somewhere past Pratt County at that point, I think. The road out there is flat and straight, and there's not much of anything on it. A grain elevator every now and then. Fencing. You can go 20 minutes without seeing another car. There was a gas station I passed, closed, lights still on in the canopy. And there was a man standing under the awning. Just standing there in the rain. Gray hoodie. Not pumping gas, not on his phone, not doing anything. Just standing there facing the road. I noticed him because it was raining and he was just out there in it and not moving. I looked in the mirror after I passed, and he was still just standing there. I don't know why I'm telling you that part first. Maybe I'm not sure if it matters. About 20 minutes after that I noticed headlights behind me. Not close. Pretty far back actually. I didn't think anything of it right away, because why would you? There's a road, there are other people on it sometimes. I just noticed them. But then I slowed down a little because of the rain, and the headlights slowed down. And I sped up some, and they stayed the same distance back. Not closer, not farther. Just the same. I thought maybe it was just how that person was driving. Maybe they were tired and just following my taillights to keep themselves on the road. That happens. I watched them for probably 10 or 15 minutes. Every time I changed speed, they changed speed. And I want to be clear about something because it sounds like I'm describing something obvious. It wasn't like they were right behind me, tailgating me, being aggressive. They were far enough back that in daylight, I probably wouldn't have been able to make out the vehicle at all. It was more like they were maintaining a specific distance. Like they were keeping me in a certain range and not letting me leave it, and not closing in either. I sped up more. Faster than I should have been going on that road in the rain. The headlights sped up. I let off the gas and coasted way down, probably 30 miles an hour on a 55 road, and the headlights coasted down too. There was a rest area coming up. One of those Kansas ones that's just a parking lot and a little brick bathroom building and some picnic tables. I pulled in. I did actually need to use the bathroom. That was real. I wasn't just testing anything. I pulled into the lot, and as I turned in I could see the other vehicle going past on the highway. Dark SUV. Had mud up the sides pretty high. I noticed it didn't have a front plate, but I only had a second to see it, and I wasn't sure about that. I went inside and used the bathroom. The lights in there were fluorescent, and one of them was going a little, not full flickering, just a slight buzz that you could feel more than see. I washed my hands. I took probably a normal amount of time in there, not rushing, not lingering. When I came back out, the SUV was parked at the far end of the lot. Just sitting there. Engine running, I could see the exhaust. Facing my direction. It hadn't pulled all the way in. It was kind of at an angle, partway into one of the spaces, but not really parked so much as stopped. I got into the Ranger and locked the door. Not like a deliberate decision, just something my hand did. And when my dome light came on, when I opened the door and the inside of the truck lit up, the SUV's headlights went off. Right then. Not a couple seconds later, not gradually. Right when my dome light came on. I sat there for a minute, maybe longer. The rain was coming down harder. I couldn't see if anyone was in the SUV from that distance in the dark and the rain. The engine was still running. I could still see the exhaust in my headlights. And all the windows were dark. I couldn't see through them. I left. I got back on the highway and I drove. For about 10 minutes there was nothing behind me, and I kept checking the mirror, and there was just the road. I thought that was it. I thought I'd been in my head about the whole thing. Then the headlights were there again. Same distance. Same steadiness. I want to make sure I'm being accurate about this, because I've thought about it since. It wasn't that they were following close and being threatening. It was almost the opposite. It was the control of it. The consistency. Like whatever distance they'd chosen at the beginning was the exact distance they were going to keep, no matter what I did. I called Tyler. My brother. He didn't pick up, which wasn't unusual. He was probably asleep. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what I would have said. The highway goes through a few small towns. Liberal is the big one. That's where I was heading eventually, but there are smaller ones before it. I started looking for the next one on my phone, just glancing at it. There was a town called Coldwater coming up, maybe 15 miles. I drove to Coldwater. It was past 1 in the morning at this point. Most of it was closed and dark. There was a Casey's that was open. I could see the lights. I pulled in, got out, and went in and walked around for a minute. Bought a coffee I didn't really want. Stood there for a little while. The SUV didn't pull in. I watched the road through the windows while I was inside, and it went past. Slow. Slower than traffic should go past a Casey's at 1 in the morning. Just rolled by. The woman at the register asked if I was doing okay, and I said yeah, long drive. She nodded. I took my coffee and went back out. I sat in the Ranger for a few minutes. The parking lot lights made everything outside them look very dark. The rain had let up a little. I watched the road. A pickup went by, then nothing for a while, then a semi going the other direction. I got back on the highway. For a long time there was nothing behind me. I got through a few more miles, made myself focus on the road, drank some of the coffee. I started thinking about Tyler and what I was going to say to him about the whole situation, because we hadn't really talked about it. That's what I was thinking about. I don't know exactly when the headlights came back. I noticed them, and I couldn't tell you if they'd been there for a minute or 10 minutes. Same distance. Same even pace. There's a point where you start trying to figure out if you're wrong. Like whether there's an explanation that's just normal. Maybe this person is going to Liberal too, or somewhere past it, and they drive the same way I drive, cautiously in the rain. And every time I've adjusted my speed, I've just happened to adjust it in the same way they were already adjusting theirs. That's possible. That's actually possible. I kept trying to make that be what it was. I tried slowing way down again, like I had before. The headlights slowed. I tried a sudden acceleration, really pressing it, and the Ranger didn't have a lot of pickup, but I got it up fast. And the headlights fell back a little bit, and then came back up to the same distance. About 40 minutes outside of Liberal, there's a county road turnoff. It's not marked as anything significant, just one of those lettered county roads that goes off into farmland. I took it. No signal, no turn signal, just turned. The headlights stayed on the highway. They didn't turn. I watched them in the mirror, and they kept going straight, and the road curved, and they were gone. I sat on that county road for a while with my lights off. The rain had mostly stopped. I could hear it dripping off the cab onto the bed of the truck. I sat there until I felt like enough time had passed, which is not a specific amount of time. I don't know how long it was. I got back on 54 and drove the rest of the way to Liberal. Nothing was behind me. I got to the motel where Tyler was staying around 3, maybe 3:30. Sat in the parking lot until it was late enough to knock on his door. He came out with 2 garbage bags of stuff and asked if I wanted to get breakfast somewhere, and I said sure. I've tried to think about whether the guy at the gas station was the same person in the SUV. The timing would work out. But I didn't see the person at the gas station well enough to say anything about them, except that they were wearing a gray hoodie and standing in the rain. And I never saw anyone in the SUV at all. I don't know if the person was following me specifically, or if it was just some kind of thing that person did. I don't know if it was the same vehicle the whole time, or if I was wrong about that somehow. I've thought about the headlights going off when my dome light came on, and I don't have an explanation for that I like. Tyler asked me on the drive back if something was wrong because I was quiet, and I said no, just tired. I don't know what else to tell you about it. My name's Erica, and I was doing night courier work in 2015, after my divorce. Medical stuff, mostly. Blood samples, prescription bins, that kind of thing. The company was called Medux, or something close to that. I don't remember exactly. The logo on the car door was blue. I did nights because nights paid more, and I needed more. That's the whole setup. So the way it worked was dispatch would call, or text a route to my phone, and there'd also be a physical sheet, printed, clipped to the visor above the driver's seat. The sheet had the stops in order, the pickup times, what I was carrying, whether it needed to stay cold. If something changed, dispatch called me direct. That was it. Nobody else had those sheets. They weren't online anywhere. You got them when you picked up the car at the start of your shift, and you turned them in at the end. That matters later. I'd been doing the job maybe 4 months when this happened. October, I think, because I remember the rain being cold. I had 3 cooler cases in the back seat, and I was running a southern loop, which meant St. Francis, then a pharmacy in Greenwood, then back up through Beech Grove. Standard night. Nothing about it was different until it was. Around 3 in the morning, I stopped at a speedway near Beech Grove. I stopped there a lot. I knew which pump was closest to the door. I knew the coffee was okay if you got it from the left side of the machine. I went in to get coffee and to use the bathroom. There was a man at the door when I came in. He held it open. I said thanks or probably just nodded. I don't remember. He was thin, wearing painter's clothes, the white kind with the paint already on them. He had a lottery ticket in his hand, and he was rubbing his thumb along the edge of it. That's what I remember about him. The thumb thing. He said something like, "You're running south tonight," and I thought he saw the company logo on the car door and was just making conversation. People did that sometimes. I said yeah or something like that and went inside. I didn't think about it. When I came back out, he was in the parking lot, sitting in an old Buick, couple pumps over from me. Engine was off. He wasn't getting gas. He was just sitting there. I noticed it, but I didn't stop. I got in my car and I left. I did not think about the Buick again for about 40 minutes. My next stop was St. Francis, which is a hospital. I had a pickup there, a cooler with blood work in it, and I had to wait for a nurse to sign off on the paperwork before I could take it. That took maybe 10-12 minutes. I was standing at a desk inside the building. While I was standing there, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text said running behind tonight. No punctuation, no capital letters. I looked at it. I didn't know the number. I thought it was a wrong number or maybe someone's work phone that dispatch had changed without telling me. That happens sometimes. I deleted it. 2 minutes later, maybe less, same number. The text said careful with Cooler 3. And that's when I stopped being okay with it being a wrong number. Because Cooler 3 was specific. I had 3 coolers in my back seat. They were numbered with tape and a marker because the pickups were different and the destinations were different, and you had to keep track. Cooler 3 was the one that needed to stay between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. It was the most sensitive one I had that night. That information was on my dispatch sheet. That information was not something anyone would know from looking at the car or seeing me at a gas station. I looked up from my phone and looked through the glass toward the parking lot. The Buick was there. Same car. Parked across the lot with the headlights off. I could see the trunk from where I was standing, and the trunk was open. Not like it had popped accidentally. Like someone had opened it and left it that way. The nurse was still standing there with the clipboard. I signed the paperwork. I took the cooler. I don't know why I didn't say anything to the nurse, or ask to stay inside or call someone. I just did the next thing on the list. I went to my car and I got in, and I locked the doors, and I sat there for a minute. The Buick did not move. I could see there was someone in the driver's seat, but the windows had some fog on them, and I couldn't see clearly. I could not tell if it was the man from the gas station. I called dispatch. It was overnight dispatch, which was one woman named Patrice who I'd talked to maybe 100 times but never met. I told her I got a text from an unknown number that mentioned my coolers by number, and I wanted to know if anyone from the company would have a reason to text me from a number I didn't recognize. She said no. She said everyone who contacted me from dispatch would show up as the company number or her number. She asked me to read her the texts. I couldn't because I deleted the first one. I read her the second one. She was quiet for a second, and then she said she was going to note it, and that I should call her if anything else happened. The Buick was still there when I pulled out of the lot. I watched my mirrors. It did not follow me. I still had one more stop. The pharmacy in Greenwood. I could have called Patrice back and said I wasn't going to finish the route, but that felt like a lot to explain, and also I still wasn't sure what I was dealing with. Someone had my route information. That was real. But it was possible it was some internal thing I didn't understand. Someone using a personal phone. Something that had a normal explanation I just wasn't seeing. I drove to Greenwood. I watched my mirrors the whole way. No Buick. The pharmacy was in a strip mall, and it was closed at that hour, but there was a back entrance for medical deliveries and a buzzer system. I buzzed and waited. The guy who came to the door was someone I'd seen before, older man, didn't talk much. He took the cooler and had me sign something, and that was it. For minutes, maybe 5. I went back to my car. There was a piece of paper under my windshield wiper. I thought it was a flyer at first, the kind they put on cars in parking lots. I pulled it out. It was a dispatch sheet. It looked exactly like mine. Same format, same company header, same font. It had my route on it. Every stop in order, the right times, the cooler numbers, the contents, all of it. But the sheet had things on it that had already happened, filled in like a log. The times I'd actually arrived at each location, not the scheduled times. The actual times. The time I'd arrived at the Speedway was written in by hand in the margin. The time I arrived at St. Francis. Both of those were accurate. I stood next to my car in that parking lot, and I read the sheet twice. Then I got in the car, and I put it on the passenger seat, and I sat there. I called Patrice again. I tried to explain what I was looking at. She asked me if it could be my own sheet that had blown off the visor. I looked up at my visor. My sheet was still there, clipped in place. I told her that. She was quiet again. She said she was going to call her supervisor and call me back. She called back about 5 minutes later and said her supervisor wanted me to drive the car back to the facility and not finish the route. She said they would send someone else for the remaining drop. I said okay. She said to hold on to the sheet that was left on my car and not to touch it more than I already had. I said okay. I drove back. I watched my mirrors the whole way. I saw a Buick on the highway at one point, a few cars back, but I lost it or it turned off. I don't know if it was the same one. When I got to the facility, the supervisor was there, a man I'd only met once during orientation. He took the sheet in a plastic bag and asked me a lot of questions. He was writing things down. He asked me to describe the man at the gas station, and I did. He asked if I'd seen the man's face clearly at the hospital. I said no. He He asked if I had any idea how someone would have known my route. I said no. He said the dispatch sheets were printed internally and kept in a locked cabinet until they were assigned. I said I understood that. He asked me if there was anyone I'd told about my routes. Ex-husband, family, anyone. I said no. That question bothered me for a while after. I asked him if he thought someone was following me or if they'd known the route in advance. He said he didn't know. He said they were going to look into it and that I should call the non-emergency police line to make a report, which I did that night from my car in the parking lot before I drove home. The officer who took the report asked me similar questions. He said they'd look into it. I don't know what that meant. I kept working the job for about 6 more weeks after that. Nothing else happened. Nobody called me back from the company about what they'd found out. I asked once, and the supervisor said they were still looking into it. The police report, I checked on it once about a month later, and the officer told me there wasn't anything further to report. The way the sheet was filled in is the part one keep coming back to. The times were accurate. The only way to get those times was to be there, or to have some way of knowing when I arrived that I can't explain. My phone, maybe, if someone was in my phone somehow. I don't know enough about that to say if it's possible. I don't know how the sheet was printed. I don't know who left it there. The man in the painter's clothes knew I was running south. South was on my dispatch sheet. I don't know how he knew that. I quit the job in December because I got a day position at a dentist's office that paid okay. I've thought about it a lot since then, and I still don't have anything that adds up to an explanation. I have the part where someone knew things they shouldn't have known, and I have the part where nothing happened to me, and I don't know what to do with the space between those two things. My supervisor got food poisoning the night before, so I did the whole route alone. That part matters because there was nobody with me to check anything against. Just me and the van and 11 stations to get through before dark. The job was documentation work. Environmental inventory before demolition. Telecom relay stations up the coast highway. Old concrete boxes the phone company built in the 70s and then mostly forgot about. My supervisor, his name is Dale, he had the full list and the route map, but I had a copy on paper, so that was fine. He was at the motel throwing up. I told him I'd handle it, and I did. Or I think I did. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. The stations were numbered. They went 1 through 11, spaced maybe 8 to 12 miles apart up the highway. The job at each one was the same. Unlock the door with the master key, photograph the interior, fill out the condition sheet, lock it back up, drive to the next one. I had done this kind of work before. Different sites, but same process. It's not complicated. The first 3 stations were fine. Nothing unusual about them. Station 1 had some water damage along the north wall, and the conduit fittings were corroded, which I noted. Station 2 had nesting material in one of the equipment bays, probably a rodent, and the floor had this soft spot near the door that I stepped around. Station 3 I remember less clearly, because by then I was just moving through the checklist without thinking much. Around Station 4 I checked the clock on the dash radio, because I was trying to gauge whether I'd finished before dark. It said 1:14. I noted that and moved on. I did Station 4, got back in the van, drove north, did Station 5. Station 5 had a broken vent on the east face, and the interior light fixture was missing entirely, so I used my flashlight. That took a little longer than usual. I got back in the van, drove north, and when I looked at the clock it said 1:14. I want to be clear about this. I'm not saying the clock was slow, or that I misread it the first time. I'm saying it said 1:14 at Station 4, and it said 1:14 after I finished Station 5. Station 5 took maybe 25 minutes. The drive between them was probably 15. So 40 minutes had passed, maybe more, and the clock said the same thing. I tapped the screen. The number didn't change. I picked up my phone to check the time there, and the phone was dead. And I know how that sounds, phones die, but I had charged it at breakfast. I had watched the percentage go to 100, and then unplugged it and put it in my shirt pocket. And now it was completely off, not even the low battery screen, just nothing. I sat in the van for a minute. I couldn't think of a good explanation. I moved on because there wasn't much else to do. I still had 6 stations left, and I didn't know what time it actually was, and the light outside looked the same as it had looked for the last 2 hours, which was that flat gray you get in November, where it doesn't really change until it just goes dark. Station 6 looked like Station 5. I mean that in the sense that all these stations looked similar because they were built to the same design, same dimensions, same door placement. But walking up to 6, I had this moment where I almost didn't check the number on the outside because I was sure I'd already done it. I checked. It said 6. The interior was different. There was more equipment still in this one. Some kind of old patch panel still mounted on the wall, so I knew it was a different station. I did the documentation and left. Back in the van, the clock said 1:14. At some point after that, the highway started doing something I couldn't account for. Not that it changed directions or anything like that. More that certain things along it kept appearing. There was a section of guardrail where 2 posts in a row were bent outward, like something had come off the road there a long time ago. I passed that, noted it without really noting it, and then some miles later I passed it again. Same 2 posts, same angle on them. I slowed down and looked. I couldn't tell if it was the same section or a different section that looked the same. I kept driving. There was a mailbox on a post at the end of a dirt road, leaning maybe 15 degrees to the right. I passed it. Later I passed it again, or one that looked exactly like it, same lean, same rust pattern on the box itself from what I could see at highway speed. I want to be honest that I was trying to find explanations. My first thought was that I was making wrong turns somehow and doubling back without realizing it. But the ocean was on my left the whole time, or it would have been if I could have seen it through the rock faces and the brush. I could hear it sometimes when I cracked the window. When I could see it through a gap in the cliffs, it was on my left. So I was going north. I had to be. The dog was the thing that made me stop. I was between stations, maybe halfway to the next one, and I saw a dog sitting at the side of the road. Golden retriever. Sitting right at the edge of the gravel shoulder, completely soaked through, and it had a tennis ball in its mouth. Just sitting there looking at the road. I noticed it the way you notice a dog. No real reason, and I drove on. 10 minutes later, or what felt like 10 minutes, I came around a long curve, and there was the dog again. Same dog, I'm sure of it, same position, same tennis ball, same spot at the edge of the shoulder. I slowed down as I passed, and the dog didn't look at me. I pulled over maybe a quarter mile past it. I sat there with the engine running. I had this process I went through, trying to list things that could explain what was happening. Maybe I'd turned around without realizing it, but the ocean was still on my left. Maybe there were 2 dogs, similar dogs owned by people who lived nearby. Maybe the mailbox was a style that was common. Maybe the guardrail damage was also common. Maybe highway crews used the same repair pattern everywhere. I tried to make these things fit, and they mostly didn't. I got out of the van. I needed to stand somewhere that wasn't the van. The wind was strong enough that I had to lean into it slightly. I walked to the guardrail and looked over. The cliff went down maybe 60 or 70 feet to water. I couldn't see the bottom clearly because of the spray and the fog sitting low over the surface. But I could see that the water was there and the ocean was on my left, which meant I was facing north, which meant I hadn't turned around. Something in the water made a sound. A big sound, not like a wave. More like displacement, like something heavy moving through the surface from below. I looked, but the fog was too thick and I couldn't see anything. I went back to the van. The radio had been off, or I thought it had been off, but when I got in it was on. Not playing music. Not a station. Just static, and underneath the static there was something that if you listened for it sounded like breathing. Slow, and not even like the pause between inhales was too long, and then the exhale came out a little unsteady. I turned it off. Then I sat there because I wasn't sure I'd actually heard that, or whether I'd been listening to static for so long that I'd started to hear a pattern in it. I drove to the next station. I had lost count of which number I was on, which I hadn't done before on a job like this. Usually the numbering is automatic because you're checking the number on the outside of every station. But I had stopped trusting the numbers somewhere back there. I stopped trusting that a station I'd documented was one I hadn't been to before. This station, whatever number it was, the interior smelled different from the others. The others had smelled like old concrete and rust. This one smelled like salt and something underneath the salt that I can't describe except to say it wasn't a usual smell for an inland structure. I photographed it and noted the equipment and left. When I got back in the van, I checked the dash clock. It said 1:14. Here is the part one keep coming back to. At some point it got dark. Not gradually dark the way it does in November, where you have that long flat twilight. I was driving, watching the road, and then it was just dark. Like I'd missed the transition entirely. I don't know how long I'd been driving. The clock still said 1:14. My headlights came on automatically. I found the motel by following the highway south, or what I thought was south because I put the ocean on my right. The drive back took about 40 minutes, as best I could guess by counting. I pulled into the lot and Dale's room light was on. I knocked and he answered and he looked bad still, but he asked how it went and I said fine. I didn't say anything else about it right then. I wasn't sure how to. I went to my room and plugged my phone in, and it came back on. The time on my phone said 4:52 in the afternoon, which meant about 3.5 hours had passed between 1:14 and when I got back, and none of that time had shown up on the dash clock. The next morning I uploaded my photographs to the project folder. There were photos from 6 stations. I had documentation sheets for 6 stations. I had 11 on my list. Dale was better by morning, and he said we could do the remaining 5 the next day. I said okay. I don't know what happened to the documentation for the other stations. I don't know if I did them, and something went wrong with the files, or if I didn't do them at all. I remember being at more than 6 stations. I remember the key going into more than 6 locks. But I only have 6 sets of photographs, and the condition sheets are only filled out for 6 stations. Dale asked me about it when the project manager called asking where the rest of the data was. I told Dale I thought I'd done all 11. He looked at me for a second, and then he said we'd just redo the missing ones. We did. Those 5 were fine. Nothing unusual about any of them. I've been through the photographs from that first day a lot, not looking for anything specific. Just looking. The photographs are correct for what they show. Concrete walls, equipment racks, warning labels, conduit. 6 stations. The metadata has timestamps, and they go from about 9 a.m. to just after 2 p.m. Then nothing until I was back at the motel and took a photo of my condition sheets to send to the project manager. Just a habit I have. The gap in the timestamps is about 2.5 hours. I don't know what I was doing for 2.5 hours. I was driving, I know that much. I have a rough memory of more stations, more locks, more condition sheets. But no photographs, no filled out sheets, no record of any of it. Dale said the clock on that van had been broken for months, that someone had put in a work order about it. I don't know why nobody mentioned that before I took the van out alone. I haven't been able to explain the dog. My son played travel hockey, so I drove a lot that year. That's the setup. That's why we were out there. It was 2009, I think February, and we were coming back from a tournament up near the border. Canadian border, northern Minnesota side. One of those stretches that's mostly logging country and not much else. My son, he was 11. He'd fallen asleep in the back seat maybe an hour in, had his blanket from home, the one with the fraying edge he always brought on long drives. I didn't think anything about the drive. I'd done that route or something close to it maybe 4 or 5 times that season alone. What I want to tell you about starts maybe 2 hours in. There's a part of that road, and I don't remember exactly which county road it was. I should have written it down, but there's a part where the highway goes for a long stretch through forest. Black spruce, close to the road on both sides. And every so often there's a break in the trees, like a clearing, and in some of those clearings there was old equipment. Logging machinery, the big kind, just sitting there half under snow. I remember noticing it because it looked strange at night, those shapes in the dark. I had the heat going because it was cold out and my son had asked me to turn it up before he fell asleep, and I kept cracking my window a little because the heat was making me tired. I was doing fine, just driving, radio low enough I could barely hear it. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a moose, and that would have been fine. You see moose out there. You slow down, you wait, they move on. So when I saw something tall standing between the trees off to my right, I didn't react badly or anything. I just watched for it in my headlights. But it wasn't crossing the road. It was moving with us. I noticed that first and didn't do anything with it right away. Sometimes your brain takes a second. I was watching between the trunks as we passed them, and I kept catching pieces of it, like just a part of its back or its legs. And the thing I couldn't account for was that we were doing maybe 55, and it was keeping up. Not falling behind. Not getting ahead. Just there, same distance into the trees, same position alongside us. I pushed the accelerator a little, brought it up to 60, maybe 62. It stayed with us. Now the thing about that stretch of road is that it's not a clean forest. It's not like a park where the trees are spaced out and you could run through them. It's dense, and there's deadfall, and there's brush, and anything moving fast through it would make noise and would be crashing around. And what I was seeing wasn't doing that. It was just moving. Smoothly, I guess is the word, though I'm not sure that's right either. I only caught pieces of it. I can't tell you I got a clean look. I turned the radio off. My son was still asleep. I checked the mirror, and he hadn't moved. I was trying to figure out what it was. I ran through the list. Moose, too fast. Wolf, too big, wrong shape. I didn't know what else. The shape of it was wrong for everything I knew to put out there. It was tall in the front, taller than it seemed like it should be, and the way it moved didn't look like the gait of anything I could name. But I only saw it in pieces. I kept telling myself that. We came to the bridge. There's a bridge over a frozen river, and on both sides of the bridge the bank opens up, so there are no trees for maybe 100 yards in either direction before the forest starts again. Open snowfield on both sides. The river was frozen, and you could see it below, just flat white with a little darker line where the channel ran. When I got onto the bridge, I looked right toward the bank, just because I was thinking about what I'd seen, and I was wondering where it had gone when the trees stopped. It was down on the bank. It was running along the riverbank below, and to my right. I saw it for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, maybe less, while I was on the bridge, and the headlights swept that direction. It was running on the snow, and the front limbs, whatever they were, they folded inward when it moved. Not outward like a dog or a horse or anything. Inward. The joints went the wrong direction, or they bent somewhere in the middle that didn't make sense. I don't know what I was looking at. I went across the bridge, and the trees came back on both sides, and I didn't see it again in the trees right away, and I pushed it to 65. My son sat up in the back seat. He sat up very suddenly, and he was awake, not groggy, just awake, and he said something to me. I won't go into what he said exactly, but what he said was that I shouldn't stop the car. Don't stop for it, is what he said. Just words a kid says. Except he said it calmly, and he'd just woken up from a dead sleep. I asked him what he meant. He didn't say anything else. He just settled back down and pulled the blanket up and went back to sleep. Or he seemed to. I don't know if he actually slept again after that. I didn't stop. I want to be clear that I didn't stop for the next 40 minutes until we got to a gas station that had lights and other cars in the lot. And I pulled in there and sat for a while with the engine running. I checked the tree line along the road for maybe 20 minutes after the bridge, and I didn't see it again. I'm not saying it wasn't there. I'm saying I didn't see it. I don't know if that's different. I've thought about what it could have been. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Because I've been in that kind of country, I grew up around it, and I know what lives out there. And nothing that lives out there runs at 60 miles an hour through dense brush without any sound. Nothing that lives out there moves the way that did. I've watched a lot of animals move in a lot of conditions, and I know what a gait looks like, and I know what a joint looks like when it bends, and what I saw on that riverbank did not match anything. I don't know what to call that. I've looked at pictures online, different things, and nothing is right. I've read about animals people report seeing up in that region, and nothing matches. I've tried to think about whether it was something about how tired I was, and how the light was working in the trees, and whether I was just connecting dots that weren't there. I've thought about that a lot. But the thing about my son is the part one can't get past. He was asleep. He'd been asleep for a long time, and he woke up, and the first thing out of his mouth was exactly the thing I'd been thinking, which was whether I should slow down, whether I should pull over, whether maybe there was something wrong with the car, or I should take a breath. I'd been debating that. And he said don't stop. Not where are we, not are we almost home, not I have to pee. Don't stop for it. I've asked him about it since. He says he doesn't remember. He was 11, and he says he doesn't have any memory of waking up or saying that, and I believe him. I think he's telling the truth, but I don't know what to do with that. I drove that route again a couple years later, different trip, and I slowed down at the bridge and looked at the banks on both sides. I don't know what I was looking for. There was nothing there. It was daylight, and there was nothing unusual about it. I'm not saying it was anything. I don't know what it was. I just know what I saw and what happened, and I've never had a good explanation for either one. Someone told me once that there are things that live up in that kind of country that people don't have names for yet. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know what I believe. I just know I didn't stop the car, and I don't think I would have even if my son hadn't said anything. And I still don't know exactly why I felt that way about it. That's all I've got on it.